We are joined now by Fox's lead college football announcer, Joel Klatt, my eternal nemesis, and I'm excited to welcome him into the show. Joel, first of all, did you watch the FCS game between Central Arkansas and Austin Peay? First part question. Second part of question, if you did, would you have ever believed you would watch Central Arkansas and Austin Peay and be excited to do so?
Well, there's so many layers to this question. The first part of your question, did I watch? I watched almost every moment as if it was a national championship game or a Rose Bowl. And
joined the club.
As such, late in the game. I loved it. I loved every moment of it, right? It was the first time, to be real honest with you, Clay, it was one of the first bright moments of this entire coronavirus for me, at least me, right? I finally felt like, okay, this is going to be okay. We're going to at some point return. And that's what that game signified to me. So I was locked in. And then, do I ever feel like I would have been locked into a game like that? I mean, here's the thing is I'm a college football nerd. Right?
Yep.
So I watch games like that. Maybe I wouldn't have been locked in live tweeting the game, but those are games that I love to watch anyways. And those kids played so hard, man. I loved it. It was a great game too. They made plays. It was sloppy. It was everything. And by the way, I was the only thing that made me furious, and you know me, I can get mad about anything. But the only thing that made me so mad is these absolute just. It's the type on Twitter. They were like sloppy game.
Yeah.
Shove it, God. Get out of my face. We've forced these kids to not have spring football. They haven't had summer. They have to have camp with one scrimmage, wearing masks, blah blah. And you want to throw out sloppy game? Save it.
You usually are traveling all over the country, calling Big Ten games, calling Pac-12 games, calling Big 12 games. Unless something crazy happens, it appears only the Big 12 of those three will be playing. Have you thought about what your fall will look like and how much different it will be to just theoretically, I think, be calling games in the Big 12?
Well, I mean, that would be the plan now, right, is that we would just be doing games in the Big 12. I've thought about it a little bit, but to be honest, I'm just trying not to get ahead of myself. I do have a game on the schedule on September 12th. I don't know if it's public or not, so I won't go into it. But I'm just looking forward to that one, and then I'm going to get another game, and I'm going to look forward to that one, and then I'm going to get another game, and I'm going to look forward to that one. And I really don't care who it is, where it is, because I think that's the point that I'm at. Is I want to get out there and call the games that I love to call. I think it's going to be certainly different, and yet at the same time, I think all of us are going to appreciate it, whether we're players, coaches, broadcasters, fans, whatever it is. I think we're going to appreciate it that much more whenever we get to see it. And I think the Austin Peay Central Arkansas game was an example of that. So it's going to look vastly different for us. Gus and I basically have a split schedule with ESPN in the Big 12, which means that we have the best pick every other week, if you will, half of the weeks, and yet that's our only conference. So there are going to be some weeks when we don't have a sexy matchup, and you know what? I'm here for it.
Given what we thought might happen, there's no such thing as an unsexy matchup if you're a college football fan, right. Just to have games, period. Right. Now, you guys theoretically...
I feel like I should have invested in some sort of condo in Norman or Austin, right?
Yeah.
I get the sense that that's where I'm going to be spending a lot of time.
So you guys will be traveling to do the games physically. Was there any talk of to let people behind the curtain a little bit? There are a lot of games, maybe depending on situations, where games might be called from, let's say, the Fox LA studio, as opposed to, and I assume ESPN probably has those same studios in Bristol. Did you say, hey, no, it's important to be there? How much different would it be to be calling that game remotely versus being able to be there physically?
Yeah. Great question. First of all, I despise remote broadcasts. I
Yep.
can tell right away when I'm watching one. I don't know if you can. I'm sure you can, and I'm sure fans out there can do the same. And so I told them, for what it was worth, I'm absolutely open to and will welcome traveling and going to be on site at games. Don't be. So basically, I was trying to remove from the equation, don't think that you've got to, in regard for me and my safety, we've got to figure out how to call these remotely, because I'll get on a plane, I'll go do whatever you need me to do, get tested, wear a mask, whatever, in order to be in person and call the game. So Gus and I will be in person. We will be live on site. I don't know about every crew. I think from a budget standpoint, that's going to be very tough this year. I would venture a guess that at least half or more of college football games across the landscape, any network, will be called remotely versus in-site.
You went to Colorado. You were the quarterback at the University of Colorado. Colorado is not playing this fall in the Pac-12. They obviously were in the Big 12 when you were playing there. But yesterday I talked to Jason Whitlock on the show, and I said, hey, how do you think you would have responded? Because he went to Ball State. How do you think you would have responded if you knew not just that the Pac-12 wasn't playing, but you looked around the country and the Big 12's playing, the ACC, the SEC, other conferences are playing? How would that have set with you when you were in college as an athlete?
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak for myself. I would have lost my mind.
Yeah.
And I would have pursued any means necessary to try to force the powers that be above, my head and the conference I played in, to force their hand. And in particular, because listen, I was not a great player, right? Now I had aspirations to potentially be drafted or be an undrafted free agent or something. And I ended up being an undrafted free agent and signed a contract with the Saints and Lions, but it was really important for my future in the sport to play, right? That's the only way I was going to potentially get an opportunity to monetize that skill, which I had been prevented from monetizing for my entire life. So I think I probably would have been in the boat of trying to form some sort of lawsuit for loss of value. I'm not sure, man. I can just tell you right now, I would have handled it really poorly. And it's something that weighs on my mind a lot, is these young men that, have basically had their life's passion ripped away from them for this period of time. And I'm just hoping that we can get some plans in place for them to have a light at the end of the tunnel in the near future, whether that's Thanksgiving or December or January or whenever it is, so that these players in all of those conferences that have postponed their seasons can at least allow the players to have that light at the end of the tunnel, to have something to train for, to have that purpose back in their life surrounding their sport.
For people out there who maybe aren't that familiar with what it's like to be a member of a college football team, and I would think that's a huge percentage of my audience, they're fans, but they may not know, how much of a struggle do you think a lot of guys that you went to school with would have without the structure and support of a season to be preparing for? In other words, there's just a lot more time to fill, and a lot of times, and this is not going to surprise anybody out there who's ever been on a college campus, the more time you have, the more trouble a lot of times you can get into, right? And so I think that's true especially for 18 and 19 and 20-year-old guys. How much do you think that difference, how much of a challenge is it for so many guys who are used to that structure to suddenly have these open falls and not necessarily know what to do with themselves?
Well, it's a massive challenge. And I can just tell you that in the normal course of a normal year, the times that you're most nervous for your teammates are those periods right at the end of spring ball or at the end of the fall season, when you get those week or two that it's kind of unbridled and there is no structure, and they can, guys can go home, guys, have finals, you're back in your own accord versus really in the throes of the structure of your program. And more so than that, more so than the structure, it's actually the structure of accountability. I think that's the word that we miss in all of this. A lot of people have talked about the structure, but that structure, what it provides is the accountability element that is so necessary for that age group in order to thrive. And so when you see in a normal year, the biggest moments that guys fall, whether it's getting arrested, failing classes, whatever it is, making poor decisions in terms of drugs and alcohol, it's probably 80-90% of the time in those small dead periods that I'm talking about, into the fall season, into spring football, when you have these non-structured weeks or two. And now all of a sudden you have way more opportunity for that. We saw over the weekend the defensive lineman at Ohio State was involved in an incident in which he was shot. And thankfully I believe he's doing okay right now. But that is a product of a lack of structure. Now you can say that has nothing to do with it. Well, it actually has everything to do with it, because I highly doubt that players would be involved in some sort of situation like that a week before their first game. Okay, so we're seeing incidents like that pop up, and I would be massively concerned about that if I was playing, and I am right now for these kids. And again, it's that structure of accountability, and the really good coaches and good programs are trying to maintain that structure and that structure of accountability as best they can, but it's very difficult without the carrot of a game.
You and I have been outspoken in the importance of sports, kids being in school, all of those things. You've done it publicly. I've done it publicly. We've also talked a lot privately ever since March started about, like what's going on, what's going to happen with sports, like a lot of people who are friends would have been doing with their friends as well. Now that we've actually had the first college football game, I felt like, and like when that toe met the leather, I was just like, hallelujah, because I don't know how anything's going to go the rest of this year, right? Trying to predict anything in 2020 has been a fool's errand. But just getting to the point where college football officially kicked off felt like such a huge win to me for people like you and me who'd been arguing in favor of college football existing, because I just feel like, and I know you've talked to me some about this, but I just feel like I've been in like a boxing match every day for months on end, right? Like where you're getting punched and you're trying to keep your gloves up and turn and punch other, like to fight for college football to be able to be played. I feel like a behind the scenes story. It's like a book at some point. I mean, it has been a real battle out there. Did you have that same feeling of exultation when the game actually just kicked off?
Yeah, I didn't feel it personally as much as I felt like it was just a really important moment for all the young men out there that are trying to play this fall, and for all the administrators that are trying to play this fall, and for everyone that's trying to be cognizant of the risks and yet also measured in what those risks actually mean. And Clay, I thought it was a really important moment, because I believe in my heart, when you talk about anything, the most difficult thing to do is to be first.
Yep.
Right? There's a reason why it's so hard to do something, to be something, to achieve something for the first time, and this felt like more of like, for lack of a better term, it has been a bit of a battle, right, that's been waging between opinions and information. And I'm not here to tell you I know exactly which one is right. I know which one I believe is right. But it felt to me like at least being the first game out there gave everybody else that's trying, like the SEC and the Big 12 and the ACC and some of these other conferences, it gave them that boost. I believe it gave them that shot of energy that tells them deep down in their soul, yes, we can make this happen. We can do this safely. We can make sure that we've got the players' safety at the forefront of our mind, and yet we can maintain the season and try to maintain the opportunities and the structure and everything that we've got going on. in intercollegiate athletics? It's a really long and probably stupid answer, but it just goes back to Clay. I thought it was massively important for that to happen, for someone to do it first, and in particular when it's an FCS game. All these big boys with their $1 million in their deep pockets and millions of dollars in their deep pockets. It's kind of like, okay, if they can do it, we better be able to do it.
Yeah, and it's a good analogy about being first. The one I like to use is forever no one believed it was possible to break a 4-minute mile. And then Roger Bannister did it. And within a few months and that next year, a ton of other guys did it as well. And it wasn't because he had done something that was supremely physically impossible. It was because their minds didn't believe they could push their bodies to do it until they saw somebody else. The mind's a powerful thing. And I think for your analogy there, for Central Arkansas and Austin Peay to be able to get this done, there are a lot of schools with a lot more resources than both of those. And, oh, by the way, they also both traveled for that game, right? It wasn't as if they were both – one team was playing at home and somebody else drove in. They both went to Montgomery, Alabama, so they both had to get down there. And so when Tomet Leather and that season actually began, and again, Thursday night, I want those games to go off, and then Saturday, and then Monday. And if all that happens, then I think we're going to be sitting around in a really good spot as we get ready for the Big 12 and the ACC to play their first games on, I think it's September 12th for major FBS football.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that I think that there's going to be bumps along the way. Like, we're going to have games postponed or canceled, right? Like, I absolutely believe that that's going to happen. But I think the more times that we can have a game scheduled and play it, the better for everybody. And just a quick note on the travel. You brought up both teams traveled. And I've heard a lot of people, and some people have literally screamed to this at my face, talking about, like, you want these kids to travel all fall? And I think to myself, first of all, traveling in a charter within a group of people that have all been tested is probably the absolutely safest way to travel you can possibly do it. You're going to be in that same bubble of people when you go to the hotel. The buses are clean before you get on the buses. You're in a bubble when you travel in a college football team. Now, if we were talking about a women's volleyball team or a men's soccer team, I think that becomes much more precarious because what do? They travel in the normal course of everyday civilian travel through the airports, on airplanes with everybody else like you and I. But a football team is so vastly different. And so I just thought that should be noted, right? Like a traveling party for a football team to go play a game is gone for one night. And that is about as good of a bubble as you can get when it comes to making sure that people are not around that shouldn't be around.
We're talking to Joel Klatt. Can you come back with us for a couple of minutes? I want to ask you a couple of more questions. One about Saved by the Bell and the other one about Star Wars, in addition to college football being back.
Yes, absolutely.
We got Joel Klatt with us, and I had a couple of things I wanted to hit with him. But before I get to important Saved by the Bell and Star Wars questions for you, let's presume that we're able to play, right? Let's presume that the Big 12, the ACC, and the SEC all finished their seasons. What do you think about the playoff, and what does that do for the Pac-12 and the Big 10 in terms of their decision if their other major conference brethren, including Notre Dame, are able to finish their year?
Well, I think it's a good question. I think if those three conferences and Notre Dame want to conduct the college football playoff in a manner which they see fit, then they should.
Yeah.
And if the Big Ten and the Pac-12 don't qualify, then they don't qualify. And guess what? The Pac-12 and the Big Ten should go try to play a Rose Bowl. There's value in that. So I'm not trying to be insensitive about it, but I think that the college football playoff has the majority of the power conferences that are going to try to play. And if they choose to move forward and conduct a 4-team playoff, I think that they should. Absolutely. Yep. And history will say what it says about the champion of that playoff or not. But It's not like we've been having a lot of Pac-12 champions and even Big Ten championships, save for Ohio State the first year.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it is interesting. Do you think, by the way, that the idea – so my thing, and for everybody out there, they already know this. I mean, I don't understand the logical rationale by which you can play in late November, but you can't play in late September. Like the SEC is starting right now September 26th. I'm not a scientist. I'm not an epidemiologist or virologist or anything else. But I don't think that what happens between September 26th and the end of November is so significant that there will be some sort of massive difference in terms of health. But based on people you talk to in the Big Ten, Pac-12, do you think that's a possibility? Do you think a spring season is a reality? Do you think it's possible those two conferences find a way to play and finish off their season in some way with a Rose Bowl? Like if you were setting odds at this point in time, what would you say about the chances they ever play?
I would have no idea about the
Right.
Pac-12. I feel like I feel like the Pac-12 is in a position where they're going to kind of do whatever.
Are you surprised, by the way, you live in California now, you played at Colorado, but it was in the Big 12. We have talked probably 98% about all the Big Ten parents fighting back, the Big Ten players, whether it's Justin Fields, all of the different major conferences, the coaches, the athletic directors, like everybody in the Big Ten has come out pretty aggressively wanting to play. I haven't heard a peep out of anybody in the Pac-12 at all. Like, Kevin Warren has gotten raked over the coals over the decision to cancel in the Big Ten. Larry Scott is obviously always getting attacked for a variety of different things. But this decision, it doesn't seem like there's been any sort of rebellion against the Pac-12 decision at all.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. I don't know why. I wish I did. I don't even really have a great theory. I think my best theory is that, not that it's political in nature, but if you view it from a political, spectrum, and only in this light, I'm not talking about red, blue. I'm talking about in this light. Is it politically valuable for a head coach in the Pac-12 with his fan base and maybe the way that fan base or administration is it politically valuable for him? Does he gain any points by coming out with that stance? And I guess my answer would be no, because of the places where all these teams are. And I don't feel like their fan bases are
like in Berkeley. There's not a ton of people dissenting to the idea that Cal wouldn't be playing football. Whereas if you're in, what does it do for Justin Wilcox to go jump on that sword? Right.
Nothing. Right. Like I don't think it serves him very well. Now, again, this is just a theory. Whereas in some of these other places, like
Columbus or Happy Valley, like those people want to see their team play.
The Nebraska fans are sitting around, and it's like, well, for Scott Frost, they will revere him forever for diving on that sword.
Right.
Forever. Right.
Yeah.
So I think it's in, again, just a theory, but I think it's in that vein.
All right, so let's move into the highly important.
And hold on, sorry. Let me. And one more thing. I also think that the Pac-12 seemed so unanimous behind it with their CEO working group, their commissioner, their reveal of the reasons why, all this stuff. I don't think that there was much room. There wasn't a lot of cracks in the foundation. Whereas the Big Ten, they came out, they didn't have the information of why they made the decision. Then all of a sudden you saw the cracks in the foundation with, well, was there a vote? Was there not a vote? We don't agree with that. And I think that's also, why you're seeing a lot more people speak up. But
by the way, let me give you credit here. We're talking to Joel Klatt. You can go follow him on Joel Klatt. And it pains me to give you credit for anything, especially in public. But it would have been, you were talking about.
Me to accept it.
Well, it's true. But you were talking about how some coaches decided to speak out, some didn't. For instance, Jim Harbaugh, Ryan Day, James Franklin, certainly Scott Frost in the Big Ten, among others, were very outspoken about, basically they wanted to play. And some media people were outspoken, some were not. I would say of anybody that calls college football games, what you put out there of the argument for why college football should be played, I thought was brave given your status, right? Because it's easy for people who are in positions of prominence to just say, hey, politically, I'm not sure in a contentious arena whether it makes sense for me to step in and pick up a sword and go on one side or the other. You could have stayed out of it. I thought you made a really reasoned and logical and well-received argument in favor of college football. That's my opinion, and I thought you were brave to do so. What was the response so far as you heard and saw it to what you put out there? Were people pleased? Was there a lot of negativity? I'm just kind of curious. I haven't asked you this before.
Yeah.
I thought you did a
good
fantastic
question.
job with it, but what was the reaction?
First of all, thank you. It probably wasn't smart to do, but I felt strongly about it, and Fox, to its credit, never muzzles us, and tells us what to say. And so, I put out what I felt strongly about, and part of that was my own, past and struggle, because as you know, I've had, I'm 9 years sober coming up on, so I know what it's like to struggle, and I just feel for the young men that are going through that and having that taken away. So I put out what I put out. If you want to go look at it, you can look at it on social media and out there. It was on, Clay, you reposted.
We put it up
Outkick.
on Outkick. Yep.
So you talked about you're asking about the feedback. I would say it was about exactly what you would think. I got some really minority in terms of numbers and loud opposition on social media, but it was a sliver of the, what I would call the overwhelming majority that actually supported it, even on social media. And then what was actually wild to me is, and I'm not going to throw anybody, under the bus and reveal names or anything, I have never been contacted by as many coaches, ADs, and SIDs in my life as I was in the next 20 hours.
Yep.
And to a man, I would say 98% of them said thank you. And that made me feel better than anything, because I thought to myself, okay, so clearly that message, was something that they had on their hearts and minds, and were in a position where they can't share it, and I was able to share it. So I'm glad you asked that question, because I'm very confident in saying what I said about the 98% number, and just like overwhelming support from the coaches, ADs, and SIDs.
I know I said that we would get to the answer. Let me bring Joel Klatt back for one more segment here. You're going to break, but I'm going to ask him. First of all, that speaks to me what the large majority actually thinks. I'm going to talk about that because I want to bring that up when we come back for just one more segment. I'm Clay Travis. This is Outkick, talking to Joel Klatt